if there was ever a time to reimagine what education could look like, this is the moment in time to do it. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the challenge of dealing with a time like this. This is something none of us has ever been through before, and you've got a lot of kids in the district, a lot of schools. This was a mammoth thing to accomplish as far as getting a plan together.
It is a challenge. We've become Zoom experts, I believe, and we're engaging and having to develop relationships with our teammates, digitally. And again, it's so different when you just want to reach out and touch your friends and your families. And we understand that right now we can't. One day soon, we hope we will. But until then, how do we make sure that we have the proper devices for our students, our families, and our teachers to be able to engage in this educational space? It gets scary at times, but I think what leaders have to do, they have to lead. And they have to make sure they're creating a space that people believe in the plans that we're putting forward and that we're thoughtful in those plans. And I have an amazing team, and they have just been just amazing to work with and to see how thoughtful they have been and intentional they have been in putting these plans together. So in that aspect, I feel so good. I feel good being a leader because of the people who surround and the support of the board.
How do you plan to address, I guess, racism and race relations with students in your district?
Oh, wow. Well, one of the things I think that is so important is, one, that we recognize that there are some inequities and disparities in America, period. One thing I wish had happened is if we were in school when a lot of this was happening, because then teachers can set the atmosphere for a dialogue for our students. But then on the other hand, you think that our parents are our students' first teachers. So this is happening while our students are at home, and they can have these critical and meaningful conversations with their parents. And I think that is probably not a bad idea, to be able to talk with your parents about what's happening in your city and around the country. For us in Columbus City Schools, when I came last year to the district, equity was one of the things that I said that I was going to focus on. We just hired a chief of equity who will start August 1st. So we are not reacting to what's happening as a district. We've made it as part of our educational model to look through our work through an equity lens. We recognize also that that a majority of our students are students of color, and that we have to respond and make sure that we have curriculum, that we have that discussion that resonate with our students, so that they can feel that they know who they are, and they can talk about who they are. They can talk about their history. It's important that we talk about the history of all of our students, but we don't want to create a climate that our students feel invisible. It is important that all of our students feel known, and can talk about who they are and their frustrations about what they feel. And it is different from a female from a male. And so I want them to be able to even look at us as leaders and as their teachers and as mentors, and say, I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable, but I do have someone that I can talk about what's happening. And then someone who's going to be honest with them and say, does racism exist in our country? Absolutely. Does it exist in our city? Absolutely. Does it exist in our schools? Absolutely. Then how do we address it? How do we talk about it in a way that's meaningful for our students and inform our teachers and our administrators about our current practices and those things that we may need to change and do differently?
When you think about equity and wanting equity and getting that for your kids in your district, what does that look like? What does equity look like for Columbus City Schools? Like, when will you feel like we have reached that?
I feel we have reached an equitable school district when every student has what he or her needs, right? So it's the individual needs of our students. So for example, when we think about students who that have the most needs, are we putting the best teachers in front of those students? Because if we're not, then that's the equity issue. Because our most proficient and expert teachers should be in front of the students with the most needs. When we think about the resources, are we giving our resources to the schools that have the most challenges? Because if we're not, that's an inequity. So we have to think about our own practices. And so when I see the day that all of our students have all of their needs met, all of our schools can address those needs in each individual building because they have the resources, and that we create a culture where we are talking openly about those systemic racism, or those practices that we know are not good practices for us, then I think we've reached that point. And we're going to start having more of those conversations. We're going to make sure that when we're looking at how we are allocating resources to our schools, that's financial resources, that's resources in the best teachers and the best principals, making sure all of our leaders and our teachers have what they need. I think that we would have reached that point. But we're not there yet, but we will get there.
I guess teacher salaries, is that based on different districts, and the more money a district has, they can pay more to attract the best teachers? And is that a problem for CCS?
Yeah, so we were developing a talent acquisition strategy. And so we're going to be partnering with other organizations, colleges specifically, and co-design what does it mean to be a teacher in Columbus City schools, which is very different from possibly our neighboring school district. And what can we do to recruit those teachers to come and teach with our students? And it may, in some instances, require a different salary, some salary incentives for for teachers to come to teach our students. And I think that's okay, because it is more challenging to teach students who have barriers that are not a part of their school day. So what I mean by that, Columbus, we have over 6,000 students who are considered vulnerable youth. So they live either in a homeless shelter or the foster care system. They need more resources to make sure that they're successful. And we should be providing more resources for those students and those families. So, and when we don't, there's a larger gap. Even when we don't provide it for our teachers. You know, you go to school, you want to be a teacher, and you come out and you're so excited about teaching and learning and what you can do for your students. But we have to have the resources to make sure that teachers have what they need, and the professional development. And we're going to increase those efforts and talk about those things that we may not have been talking about before. You know, what does that mean when you're teaching of students of color, students of different gender identities? What does that mean? And how do I make sure that those students are engaged in the learning and the outcomes that they're reaching mastery? You know, you want our students reading and writing and be critical thinkers. But there are different strategies to approach those students based on where they come to us from.
The contract with CPD expired.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So does this mean going forward in a whole new direction, and that's what this worker group has to come up with? Or could you end up bringing Columbus Police back, but just setting forth different rules for them?
Right. I think a little bit of all of that. You know, it's do we have a problem? Do we need to reconnect and have the dialogue? Absolutely. Are we going to return back the way we were? Absolutely not. So what does it look like? So we don't know right now. I'm just happy that we're going to have the dialogue and the honest dialogue. And I think maybe that's what's really exciting, that you really say, you know, people have personal feelings. I understand that. But when people look at, we service 50,000 students, 109 schools. How do we ensure that our students are safe and and their staff is safe. What does that look like? And who is providing that for us?